Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of The Goldie Show, podcast or video show, YouTube show, whatever you want to call it, where we talk about Islamic terrorism, jihad, the Middle East, and of course, Middle Eastern politics. Big shout out to the subscribers and members and mods and everyone for joining on the YouTube channel. I look forward to our conversation. Sorry about the delay. Was having a little bit of internet connectivity issues there. Um, Kind of strange because it seems like I'm having issues with my download speed, but my upload speed is fine. So, I mean, I don't think I'll have any issues with broadcasting. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see what I'm doing, but for now it's working. So, fingers crossed, the internet issue has been fixed. Thank you for your patience. So, today we have a very interesting episode. We're going to play a, a speech, a talk by Robert Spencer. Now, who is Robert Spencer? If you're not following him on X, make sure to do so. Here is his X profile at Jihad Watch RS. He also does have a YouTube channel, which I'll share with you afterwards. So he is the author of 32 books, including The History of Jihad, The Critical Quran, Muhammad, A Critical Biography, The Palestinian Delusion, Holy Hell. Here's a little bio. Here's a little bio that I found about him. So I'm just going to share this with you guys. So, Robert Spencer is the director of Jihad Watch and a Shillman Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center. He is the author of 30 books, including the bestsellers The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam and the Crusades, The Truth About Muhammad, The History of Jihad from Muhammad to ISIS, and The Critical Quran. Spencer has led seminars on Islam and jihad for the FBI, the United States Central Command, the United States Army Command and General Staff College, the U.S. Army's Asymmetric Warfare Group, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the Justice Department's Anti-Terrorism Advisory Council, and the U.S. Intelligence Committee. He has discussed jihad, Islam, and terrorism at a workshop sponsored by the US Department of State and the German Foreign Ministry. He is a senior fellow with the Center for Security Policy and is a regular columnist for PJ Media and Front Page magazine. His works have been translated into numerous languages. I was looking for different talks or videos about jihad and the history of jihad. And I found this one lecture. So this is a video from 7 years ago. It's on the YouTube channel of the Westminster Institute. And this is from September 8, 2018. So let's play this. And I'm hoping that this is going to give you all, I guess, a Jihad 101. And hopefully it will help you to recognize some of the signs when it comes to jihad, Islamic terrorism, and political Islam. Because again, my focus here is not necessarily on religion. I mean, you can practice whatever you want. I don't care. You can believe whatever you want. I don't care. But the issue is when people start weaponizing their religion and use it as a justification to murder, capture, enslave others, and to take over. And that's really what jihad is. So we're going to watch this documentary. I'll provide my commentary as we go along. For everyone in the YouTube chat, I noticed that my super chats had been turned off for some reason. So I did turn on the super chats again. So yeah, there we go. All right, let's get started here.
Robert Spencer is the director of Jihad Watch and a Shillman Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center. He's the author of 18 books. I won't name them all, or half his time will be taken. A number of them are New York Times New York.
You can tell it's an older video because here he says he's the author of 18 books. That was in 2018. Of course, it's 2025 now, and I think he's written like 30 books or something.
Times bestsellers. And I assume his new book will be, because it's already sold out on Amazon and it was just listed, and that is The History of Jihad from Muhammad to ISIS. I'd say they're available for sale on the table outside in the library, but they're already sold out. But in case you haven't had a chance to get your copy signed, I know that Robert would be happy to do so after his presentation. Other books, just quickly to name a couple: Stealth Jihad, How Radical Islam is Subverting America, The Complete Infidel's Guide to ISIS. He's led seminars on the subject of jihad and Islam for many national security government institutions, both domestic and foreign policy, the FBI, United States Central Command, U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, Justice Department, Anti-Terrorism Advisory Council, and so forth. He's a weekly columnist for PJ Media and Front Page Magazine. He's written, in addition to his 18 books, hundreds and hundreds of articles. He's a contributing writer to the Investigative Project on Terrorism and as an adjunct fellow with the Free Congress Foundation. He has an MA in Religious Studies from University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and he has been studying about Islamic theology, history, and law in depth since 1980. Please join me in welcoming Robert Spencer.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you everyone for coming. It's a great honor to me to speak at the Westminster Institute, and I admire the great work that you've done here over the years and all the resources you have provided. I hope in this book, The History of Jihad, to fill a gap that has not been addressed thus far. My friend David Wood, the great skewerer of Islamic apologists, he told me not long ago that he knew about what was in the Quran, that there were deeply problematic passages within it, and he knew about the life of Muhammad, that Muhammad was not exactly, as Karen Armstrong says, a 7th century Gandhi, but
I mean, he's not
really
wrong.
says that too. But he was actually a warlord who led armies, committed the assassination of his enemies, and so on. But that after that, there's a gap until 20th century jihad terrorism becomes part of our daily lives. And so the history of jihad, I wrote actually, and it's a book that I've wanted to write for many years in order to fill that gap and to give people a general overview of what happened after Muhammad died and before the Saudis struck oil and started financing Wahhabi terrorism around the world. And it is a story that I hope you will find interesting. I think it is a pressing moment in many ways for American and American public policy and the public policy of many other countries today. And I thought that tonight I would try to outline some of that. One of the first things that I think is noteworthy about the 14th century history of jihad is what you do not see in it. And that is, you do not see any Muslim resistance to jihad activity, to jihad violence. You do not see ever in any country, at any time, in any place, under any circumstances, some large Muslim organization opposing jihad violence.
He makes a very good point there. I mean, how many large Muslim organizations spoke out during the Yazidi genocide that happened recently in Iraq, right? Where ISIS terrorists were kidnapping Yazidis and they would execute the men, and they forced Yazidi women and girls to become sex slaves. Um, I don't know how many large Muslim organizations spoke out against that. In fact, I don't think any really did. And so he makes a very good point there as well.
Now,
I mean, even to put it in context today, um, in Canada, for example, after the October 7 genocidal massacre um, by Hamas, no Muslim organization in Canada spoke out against it. No Muslim organ, like the National Council of Canadian Muslims, did not condemn the attack. Afterwards, they, I think, put out like a lukewarm message after there was a lot of pressure or something. But like as soon as that happened, all of these Muslim organizations started talking about, in Gaza.
why does that matter? Because nowadays, Western Europe in particular, the United States to a lesser degree, we are betting our futures on the idea that we can bring in large numbers of Muslims into the United States and we will not ever have any problem with jihad activity. That is all a thing of the past that we need not be concerned about. But one thing we also do not see in the history of jihad is any rejection, reformation, reconsideration, or other kind of mitigation of the elements of Islamic texts and teachings that gave rise to jihad activity in the first place. And so it is certainly true, it is undeniably true that most Muslims today are not waging jihad. That's great. And once again, we are betting our future on it. However, the idea that most Muslims today are not waging jihad means that they are therefore democratic pluralists who accept the principles of human rights that are enunciated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations of 1948 remains at best unproven and has no historical antecedents whatsoever. There was, all through state warfare, in the Muhammad according to, and almost immediately after that, and conquered the Middle East. They conquered power.
Okay. Here, yeah, the Muslim conquest of Persia as something that happened. Yeah, I know. Okay. All right, give me a moment here, guys. Um, Thank you. Thank you. It's just, I don't know what's going on with my internet connection. Okay. It seems like my internet, like I'm doing an internet speed test and it looks like it's back up. Okay. So I'm back up to my regular speeds. Yeah. Like my internet connection just died. All right. Sorry about that. But we are back and we're going to just power through here. So maybe whatever internet connection issues they were having has been fixed. Nothing is going to stop us from our history lesson, guys. We are going to learn about the history of jihad. So there we go. All right. So as I was saying, yeah, I wish I was on dial-up these days. As I was saying, um, like when it comes to the Muslim conquest of Persia, a lot of people who haven't studied history, they think that like, you know, Persia became Muslim through peaceful means, right? They just assume that like Muslims showed up with like brochures and chocolate and flowers. No, that's not how it happened. It was incredibly bloody. Um, and yeah, like it was absolutely terrible. And I have a lot to say on that, but I'm going to dedicate a whole episode to the Muslim conquest of Persia. But essentially, what we are seeing today in terms of how um, Islamists are going after non-Muslim communities, whether it's in Sudan or whether it's in Nigeria, or whether it's in the Middle East or anywhere else in the world, in India, for example. This is not a bug. This is a feature of jihad. And this is how they have been operating since Islam was invented 1400 years ago. I just wanted to point that out there. All right, I'm going to go back just a little bit. Um, okay.
No historical antecedents whatsoever. There was, all through the history of jihad, state warfare by Islamic entities against non-Muslim entities solely because they were non-Muslim.
Yep.
We see this right from the beginning.
And guys, if you remember, so in the live stream last night, the one with Sam Shamoon, he spoke about passages in the Quran which basically commands Muslims to go after and attack non-Muslims.
The Muhammad, according to Islamic tradition, is supposed to have died in the year 632. And almost immediately after that, the armies came out of Arabia and conquered the Middle East and North Africa. Very soon they conquered Persia, which was one of the two great powers of the day, and they attacked the other great power of the day, the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire. And
oh wow, Major. Thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate that. And yeah, you make a very, very good point. So Major says, let's be clear, both the Byzantine and Sassanid Persian empires were overrun only because they had exhausted each other in a 30-year war. Islam lives only through war. It has no other purpose. That's an excellent point. When people ask, well, how was Persia overrun? That's exactly it. It's because they were exhausted after a 30-year war, and the Arab Muslim invaders took advantage of the weakness of the civilization of the time. They took advantage of the weakness of the Persian Empire, and that's how they were able to invade. Otherwise, they would not have had any chance whatsoever. That is an excellent point, and a lot of people don't know about that, or those that do and try to deny it, they try to rewrite history, and they say no, like Islam is a religion of peace. It's absolutely not. The only way it expanded was through bloodshed and through conquering. Absolutely, 100%. Thank you for that, Major, and thank you so much for the support. Really, really appreciate that.
And by 732, 100 years after the traditional date for Muhammad's death, they were, of course, in central France, fighting at Poitiers or Tours against Charles Martel, Charles the Hammer, who stopped their advance. And they besieged Constantinople, the great city of the Eastern Empire, first in 675, then again in 717, all the while thus fighting against Europe from both sides. And this book is the first to discuss this at tremendous length in a narrative fashion, they were also pressing the jihad into India and waging it with especial fury there, because the Indians were not people of the book. Most of you, I'm sure, know that the Quran speaks of Jews and Christians and Zoroastrians and some others as people of the book, who have supposedly legitimate revelations from Allah that they have twisted and
I'm not sure if the Quran refers to Zoroastrians as people of the book. I know that in both Christianity and Judaism, Zoroastrian is viewed as a monotheistic religion. And there are some people, I don't want to get into like religious or theological debates, but there is a school of thought out there that certain elements of Christianity were inspired by Zoroastrianism, by Mithraism. But I don't know if the Quran says that Zoroastrians are people of the book, because they don't view us that way whatsoever. So if anyone has any info on that, let me know. Like I'll try to look it up as well. I'll make a note. I'll look it up. I don't know if I agree with that particular point, but I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know.
changed out of their original meanings, and thus they, out of respect for this revelation, they are given the opportunity to live in peace as non-Muslims within the Islamic State. But they have to submit to various humiliating and discriminatory regulations, most notably the tax, the jizya, that's specified in the Quran in chapter 9, verse 29.
Yeah, I don't. Then Zoroastrianism is definitely not. They don't consider us one of the peoples of the book. Absolutely not, because it's not an Abrahamic faith.
For the dhimmis, the so-called protected people. Now, these humiliating and discriminatory regulations made life very, very hard for these populations, such that you could ask, for example, what happened to the Christians of Egypt? Egypt was 99% Christian when it was invaded in the late 630s and conquered in the 640s. Now it's about 10% Christian. Where did all the Christians go? Did they move? No, they're still there. They're the Muslims of Egypt. And what happened?
Sorry. Yeah, fairy fiction. You're right. Absolutely. They refer to us as Majus and Majusi, which is a very very discriminatory, derogatory term. That's how they refer to Iranians. Yeah. So yeah, they don't consider us as people of the book.
Life was so difficult to live as a dhimmi in Egypt that ultimately over time, the only thing that they had to do to be out from under all this humiliation and constant harassment was to convert. They converted. It's very hard to think that anybody faced with that kind of a situation would do anything different, although of course some did hold out, and we should acknowledge their courage and perseverance. At the same time, the Hindus in India did not even have that protection because they were not people of the book. And consequently, the choice that Muhammad and the Quran give for the people of the book to convert or submit to the rule of Islamic law or be killed, for the Hindus, it was only convert or be killed. And as I show in the book, the history of jihad in India was especially bloody and especially violent. At a certain point, actually, they had to grant them honorary people of the book status because it simply wasn't possible to kill them all. But they were still nonetheless extraordinarily harsh toward especially the Hindu temples. The Quran speaks about protecting churches and synagogues because the name of Allah is spoken there. That was often honored in the breach, but there was no such protection afforded to the Hindu temples at all. And thousands, tens of thousands of them were destroyed. A great patrimony of human culture lost forever. And in the middle of all this, you have, this is mainstream Islam. You have state actors doing this. First, Muhammad unifying Arabia. Then the so-called rightly guided caliphs, the four successors of Muhammad as the leaders of the Islamic community, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. And then the Umayyad Caliphate, the Abbasid Caliphate, the Ottoman Caliphate, and some of the outliers, the Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba in Spain, the Fatimid Shiite Caliphate in Egypt. All of these are Islamic states, and they all waged jihad against non-Muslims on the basis of the Islamic imperative in the Quran and Sunnah to do so. The difference that we have nowadays comes about at the beginning of the 20th century, because the last caliphate, the Ottoman Empire, was abolished by the secular Turkish government, by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the founder of modern Turkey, in 1924. Now, Ataturk was nobody to admire in any respect. He was just as brutal to the religious minorities as the Ottomans had been, if not more so. But he objected to political Islam, and he was unique among the leaders of Islamic states throughout history. He was the first ever to say the troubles that we're having come from Islam. And what we have to do is get rid of Islam as much as we can, and then our country will prosper. And he consciously patterned Turkey after Western secular models of governance. Of course, nowadays, all that's being rolled back by Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey today. But for almost 100 years, Turkey was a secular state, a relatively secular state, and the caliphate was no more. So what did the people who believed that there was an Islamic imperative to wage war against and subjugate unbelievers, and that the caliph was the tip of this spear, what did they do when there was no more caliph? They decided to form various international organizations that would work toward restoring the caliphate. The first of these was founded in 1928, the Muslim Brotherhood. Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Brotherhood, made it very clear that what he was intending to do was to create a movement that would restore the caliphate and thereby the unity of the Muslims. And that once the unity of the Muslims was reestablished, then they could wage offensive jihad again against non-Muslim states. But in the meantime, there is the concept of defensive jihad. I should explain. In Sunni Islamic theology, and of course the Sunnis are 85 to 90% of Muslims worldwide, the caliph is the only one authorized to declare offensive jihad. And he's not just authorized, he has the responsibility to do so. If he doesn't do it, he could be removed on that basis. He has to declare offensive jihad on a regular basis against non-Muslim states. But if there's no caliph, there's no offensive jihad. So since 1924, all jihad has been defensive. And you might think, well, that's absurd. What was defensive about 9/11? If you read the communiques of Osama bin Laden from the 1990s, he lists a long list of grievances, terrible things that the Americans have supposedly done that justify defensive jihad against the United States.
It's true. And, you see now a lot of this rhetoric where people are blaming Islamic terrorism on the United States and Israel, which is just wild to me. I mean, jihad has existed for a very long time, well before America, well before modern day Israel, and so it is just such a ridiculous notion to me anyway, and to many people who understand jihad and how it operates, when people blame the actions of Islamic terrorists on the United States and Israel. There's an element of anti-imperialism ideology there, there's also an element of Marxism and communism involved, because this is a very anti-imperialist narrative that's pushed not only by the Islamists but also by the Russians and the communists as well. Um, and in fact, the Soviets back, back in the 50s and 60s, the Soviets actually funded a lot of the groups that eventually became Islamic terrorist groups, and many of them were trained by the Soviets, by the KGB. A good example of that is Yasser Arafat. Um, and his terrorist group that he created, and that's why a lot of these Islamic terrorist groups have elements of communism um, within their ideology, within their imagery, within their flags, because Islamists and communists are united in their anti-imperialist ideology against Western civilization.
Notably, Sunni Islamic theology specifies that if a Muslim land is attacked, it is the responsibility of every Muslim everywhere to wage jihad to win it back and to repel the invaders. So Osama bin Laden said, "Look, this is a little bit later. No, actually, it's not. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the second Gulf War. The first Gulf War, the American troops go into Saudi Arabia, and Osama bin Laden said they're trampling down the sacred soil of the kingdom of the two holy places. They have no business being there. This is an invasion that triggers this defensive jihad." And 9/11 was a defensive jihad in that respect. Every jihad has been defensive. All 30.
Sorry, I just wanted to interrupt really quickly because someone was asking, who was it? Keith was asking about my documentaries on Iran. Just very quickly. Yeah, so if you want to learn more about the history of modern day Iran, and as well as what led to the is 1979 Islamic Revolution, right on my YouTube page, the second playlist, Iranians Rate Documentaries About Iran. You want to go here. I would recommend going to the first one here. I gave it a rating of 3 out of 10, but it was a 1 hour documentary, and it took 4 hours for me to live stream that. So it's 3 hours worth of explanation, providing additional information. So anyone who wants to learn about, the history of modern day Iran and what led to the 1979 Islamic Revolution, definitely check this video out right over here. All right, sorry about that. Let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. I'll just go back a little bit here.
Soil of the kingdom of the two holy places. They have no business being there. This is an invasion that triggers this defensive jihad. And 9/11 was a defensive jihad in that respect. Every jihad has been defensive. All 30,000 jihad attacks since 9/11 around the world, they're all couched in this. If you read the communiques of jihad leaders, they always retail grievances. It's not because they're inveterate whiners, although they are. It is also because they have to list the grievances to justify what they're doing as defensive. If they don't, then they have no authorization to wage jihad. So what we see in that is, although there's a discontinuity at the beginning of the 20th century and no more state actors at least directly declaring jihad and carrying it out, you could say that the Saudis, certainly with spending so many billions of dollars to spread Wahhabi Islam around the world, that is a certain waging of jihad that is just as unmistakable as any Ottoman invasion of Vienna or Eastern Europe in general. Nonetheless, the fact remains that there was a change with the demise of the caliphate in the approach to how jihad was justified. But there was no end in jihad. And above all, there was no internal resistance. First, you have mainstream Islam carrying out the jihad because you have the Islamic states of the world carrying out jihad. The Mughal Empire in India, as well as the Ottomans, the Abbasids, the Umayyads, and so on. And then you have jihadis justifying what they're doing on the basis of defensive jihad, which is a mainstream concept in mainstream Islamic law. Nowhere do you find ever in history that jihad was only the province of a tiny minority of extremists who were twisting and hijacking the true teachings of the peaceful faith. That never happens anywhere. And anybody who would challenge that, I would ask you to specify when and where was there this Islamic movement against jihad activity, under what theological basis did it proceed, and what became of it. But there just isn't any such thing in Islamic history. The second thing you do not see in the history of jihad is any let-up, any respite. It is something that people are taken by surprise about. I was speaking to a marvelous group not long ago, and they were very well informed, very committed, very interested, very involved. And I mentioned in passing this fact that there was never any let-up, and people were shocked and said, wait a minute, what about the age of tolerance and pluralism in Al-Andalus? What about Muslim Spain? What about the paradise of tolerance and proto-multiculturalism that Maria Rosa Menoncal speaks about in her book, The Ornament of the World? Everybody knows Muslim Spain was a paradise of coexistence, right? Well, unfortunately, here again,
You know what's really messed up is that there are some people who invert the history of the Muslim conquest of Spain, and when Spaniards were able to reclaim Spain and take control of it back from Islam, um, there's certain people who refer to that as like the Muslim genocide of Al-Andalus, which to me is like the funniest thing ever. Um, I haven't watched this documentary, so I mean, I don't know if he's going to mention it or not. I mean, I have a feeling he will. But one of the things as well about jihad is that once a land has been conquered in the name of Islam, they view that land as Islamic forever. So that's why you'll see certain Islamic radicals who still refer to Spain as Al-Andalus, and they still talk about, reconquering and reclaiming Spain because it belongs to them. And similarly, a lot of these Islamic radicals, especially the pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas movement, one of the reasons that they want to eradicate Israel, even though Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people and Israel belongs to the Jewish people. One of the reasons that these Islamic radicals want to completely eradicate Israel is because they believe that because they conquered Israel in the name of Islam, um, it always belongs to them no matter what. And the fact that there is now a non-Islamic state there, that's a big affront to them. And so that's why all of these like pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine Islamic radicals, they will never agree to a two-state solution because these are people who legitimately believe that they have like an Allah given right to the land just because they conquered it at some point. And that's why even now, even though there's a ceasefire, you still see, pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine demonstrations in Western countries where these people are still continuing with the rhetoric of, Israel must be eradicated completely. Like there's no middle ground with Islamic radicals. And this is how they've been able to expand, right?
this is a historical myth. There are a great many of these things. What I tried to do in this book actually was puncture some of the historical myths that people take for granted nowadays. And to do that, went back to the primary sources that were eyewitnesses, or in many cases, the Muslim court historians. The Mughals in India were especially careful to always have court historians. These guys who, at the time something would happen, they would write about how wonderful it was that the emperor so-and-so, he just demolished 325 Hindu temples. He took all the gold and he strewed it in front of the mosque so people would trample on the idols as they went into the mosque. Isn't he wonderful? Happy Hindustan. That's a quote. It's true. Anyway, people who think that Islamic terror tactics are newly minted should look at the reality of Muslim Spain. And in particular, for example, the rule of the Cordoba Caliph Abdurrahman III. This is the words of the 11th century Muslim historian Ibn Hayyan of Cordoba. He says that on one occasion, Muhammad, an officer of Abdurrahman III, chose the 100 most important barbarians. That could be you, because there was a lot of Christians, and sent them to the Alcazar of Cordoba, where they arrived on Friday, March 2nd, 939. But since Abdurrahman was vacationing at another place, they took them there, and their marching coincided with the people coming out of the mosque on this Friday afternoon, so that many gathered and followed to see what end the prisoners would have. And it turned out Abdurrahman was installed on the upper balcony over the orchard facing the river to watch the execution. All the prisoners, one by one, were decapitated in his presence and under his eyes, in plain sight of the people. And their feelings against the infidels, Allah alleviated. You see, they were very happy to see this. As a matter of fact, the Quran, remember in chapter 9, verse 14, says, fight them and Allah will soothe the bosoms of the believers. And so if you are feeling sad and depressed, kill an infidel. You'll feel better. Allah will soothe the breasts of the believers in doing this, in fighting the unbelievers. And this is something that you see actually recurring throughout Islamic history. Islamic chroniclers making reference to that and taking it quite seriously, that through these acts of savagery and violence, the Muslims were pacified and gladdened in their hearts. And of course, the most notorious example of tolerance and pluralism in Muslim Spain was in 1066 in Granada, when rules are often honored in the breach, and just because something is Islamic law doesn't mean that every Islamic ruler has always observed it. Just as every rule is not always followed by every one of us. Some of us perhaps may have had a speeding ticket now and again or something of this kind. And so in Granada in 1066, there was a Muslim ruler who had a Jewish friend whom he appointed essentially the mayor of Granada. And the local Muslims were furious because Islamic law specifies that a non-Muslim must not have authority over a Muslim, especially a Jew. And so there was a Muslim poet, and he wrote a very lengthy poem. I won't...
That's such a weird thing. I mean, I just want to point out, I don't know of any other religion that says something like that. It's just such a weird thing. This was a revelation from God. I mean, these are some of the examples that should make you think and wonder about, some of the ideology behind this religion. I mean, it's just such a very bizarre thing to have in a religious book, right? Why is your book targeting Jewish people like that? It's just so weird.
Read all of it to you, but this is the tenor of it. Turn your eyes to the Jews who are outcast dogs. Why would you be different and bring them near when in all the land they are kept afar? I came to live in Granada, and I saw them frolicking there. They divided up the city in the provinces. It was one of their accursed men everywhere. They collect all the revenues. They dress in the finest clothes while you wear the meanest, and so on. So hasten to slaughter them as an offering. Sacrifice him, for he is a precious thing. Do not consider it a breach of faith to kill them. The breach of faith would be to let them carry on. 4,000 Jews were killed in a pogrom in Granada after this poem was published. And so this was a direct reaction to the Muslim ruler breaking Islamic law by appointing a Jew to have authority over Muslims. So this was tolerant, pluralistic Muslim Spain. What you see in the history of jihad is that wherever Muslims have gone, there have been among them violent jihadis who committed acts of violence against non-Muslims. And they were never upbraided or rebuked or otherwise opposed by any Islamic authority, and were often rewarded for doing so. So we see these two things, that there was never any internal resistance and there was never any respite. These things, the violence against unbelievers is a constant of Islamic history. The third golden thread that we see in the history of jihad is that non-Muslims were often the best help to the jihadis, which ought to ring a lot of bells today. But you take, for example, the conquest of Spain. Now, the conquest of Spain is shrouded in legend, and I'm not vouching for the absolute historicity of any of this, but these legends are alive among the people of Spain to this day. And the story goes that there was a Christian count, Julian of Ceuta, who had a daughter, and his daughter was very bright. He sent her to the court, kind of like sending her to Bill Clinton's White House as an intern. And Roderick, the Visigothic king of Cordoba, was an admirable predecessor of Bill Clinton. So the girl, her degree of guilt in this is widely controverted in the Spanish legends. But in any case, Florinda is one of the most common names that has come down to her. Florinda, being thus outraged, Count Julian was even more outraged and determined that Roderick had to pay. How could he get back at the King of Spain? He decided to go to Tariq ibn Ziyad, who was a Muslim ruler in North Africa. And he told him, "You want to invade Spain?" And Tariq said, "Sure, I'd love to, but every time they see us coming in our boats, their defenses are prepared and we are repelled." So he said, "I have a solution to that. I'll give you my boats, and they'll think it's me, and no defenses will be up." And so Tariq ibn Ziyad used Count Julian's boats, got across the strait, and once on the beach, he burned Count Julian's boats, which I think is not entirely sporting. They were, after all, a loner. But he burned the boats, and he told his men, "We are going to take this land for Islam, or we're going to die here, but we're not going back." It's noteworthy in terms of how important it is to know history. A few years ago, there was a big controversy in the Minneapolis area about a charter school that was teaching Islam as fact. It was all Muslim in any case, but it was a public school getting public funds. So there was a little bit of controversy over it being a public school and being essentially a madrasa. And the name of the school, I noticed, and I was surprised to note that nobody seemed to ever ask, "Wait a minute, why is this school called Tariq ibn Ziyad Academy?" Who's Tariq ibn Ziyad? Nobody seemed to care. Nobody ever looked it up. As far as I know, it was never in any of the Minneapolis coverage of this. But you gotta wonder, why would a school in Minnesota name itself after this figure? Could it have to do with maybe having the same goals? I mean, this is what he's famous for. He's the great conqueror of Spain. And he was able to do it by means of the help of this Christian who was enraged.
That's actually insane. Like there's a publicly funded Muslim school in the United States named after the guy who conquered Spain in the name of Islam and, turned Spain into an Islamic hellhole for several centuries before the Christians were able to reclaim their country. And this is what I mean when I said earlier about how there's like still a bunch of radicals who are upset by the fact that the Christians were able to reclaim and free Spain from Muslim rule, and they've never let it go. And I mean, just think of the symbolism and the imagery here, right? Like you have this group of Muslims who go to the United States, which is a Christian country built by, white Christian people. Um, and then they set up a school and they name the school after the Muslim guy that conquered Spain. I mean, kind of makes you wonder what their intentions are, right? If they're um, promoting someone who conquered Spain, makes you wonder if maybe they want to conquer the United States. I mean, it's just out of like all the names of all the people, they decided to go with that. And then apparently, like he's just saying, it was a publicly funded school. So, US taxpayer dollars are funding a school that glorifies the Muslim conquest of Spain.
Over he had his own grievances, and I'm not saying his grievances were illegitimate, but perhaps he didn't count on the consequences that it would take 700 years to undo what he did. There are so many other examples of this in Islamic history. In 1345, the Byzantine Emperor John VI Cantacuzanos, he was in the midst of a dynastic dispute, and he invited the Ottomans to go and fight against his rivals and let them into Eastern Europe to do that. And of course, they're still there. The Ottomans, at one point, of course, controlled all of Eastern Europe. And now they just have that little bit of Europe that is so much trouble because it gives them a claim to be in NATO and everything else, the Turks, that is. But it was John the Emperor, John VI Cantacuzanos, who allowed the Ottomans to enter Europe in the first place in order to solve his dynastic dispute. And I don't think that he expected that they were just going to stay, but he wasn't probably thinking about the whole of jihad activity or the jihad doctrine, even though it was something that he and the emperors of his time, the other emperors of his time, had ample reason to know all about. You may recall about 12 years ago now, Pope Benedict XVI got in a lot of hot water. There were riots all over the world because he quoted a Byzantine emperor, Manuel II Palaeologos. And Manuel II said, there is nothing new that Muhammad brought except what is evil and inhumane. And this, of course, was terrible and Islamophobic, and Benedict had to apologize, and innocent people were killed by those who were objected to their prophet being called evil and inhumane. And nobody here again seemed to ask, well, wait a minute, who was this Manuel II Palaeologos? Why did he say this? I mean, he's one of the tragic figures in this book. You read about how he was essentially a vassal of the Ottoman emperor. The Ottoman emperor actually even sent him to put down uprisings among the Turks and kept him prisoner at the court, where he was routinely mocked and vilified, ridiculed. He had a very rough life and a sad and tragic life, going also to Europe when he was free, trying to get support for a new crusade to roll the Ottomans back and preserve the Byzantine Empire, all of which failed. The Byzantine Empire fell. Constantinople was entirely conquered 9 years after his death. So he had direct daily experience of what he was talking about. And that seems to me that should have been part of the debate when the Regensburg Address controversy was raging. But here again, nobody seems to have any historical interest. One final example of non-Muslims aiding the jihad are the British, of course, who in the latter part of the 18th century, there arose a reformer in Islam. A lot of people ask me all the time, well, what are the chances of reform? What we need is Islamic reform. Another thing you'll see in this book actually is that there's been plenty of reform. There's lots of reform in Islamic history. Now, the thing about it is, think about reform. What is reform? Whether you're a Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, or none of the above, the people most famously known as reformers are those who said, we're going to get rid of all the later additions and get back to the basics. That's what reformers generally do in whatever context. And so the Almohads, who were among the rulers of Muslim Spain, they were reformers. And the fellow who arose in Arabia in the 18th century to whom I referred, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, he was a reformer. He began to fight against the Ottomans. He said they were not Islamic enough. They had strayed from true Islam. He was going to restore true Islam. He began to gain a following when he personally stoned an adulteress to death to show how Islamic he was. And he did get a following. One of the main...
That's pretty much what happened in Iran as well. If you go back and you look at the documentaries, the Islamic radicals who ended up taking control of the country with the help of the communists and Marxists and of course the Soviets, their biggest claim was that the country was not Muslim enough, and they did not like the fact that in 1963, the Shah of Iran, God bless his soul, he gave women the right to vote. There was no guys, here's the thing. There was no women's suffrage movement in Iran. The Shah recognized that in order to modernize Iran and bring Iran up into the first world, women need to have the same rights as men. And so in 1963, not only did he give women the right to vote without them even having to have a women's suffrage movement or anything like that, but in that same year, in 1963, Iranian women actually ran for office and were voted in. This really, really pissed off the Islamic clerics at the time. They didn't like where the country was going, and they were complaining that the Shah was not Muslim enough. So, yeah, it's interesting how Robert Spencer's referring to the reformers as those who want to go back to the basics. Very interesting, because that's pretty much what happened to Iran when it was occupied in 1979.
Main followers he got early on was a chieftain in Arabia named Ibn Saud. Ibn Saud and Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab began to fight a jihad against the Ottomans, against the other rulers in Arabia. They began to gain a little bit of territory. And by the middle of the 19th century, the Wahhabi movement, the Saudi movement, caught the attention of the British Empire, which was in several hundred years of struggle against the Ottomans. Now, the Ottomans by this time had well earned the nickname the sick man of Europe. And they weren't really a formidable force at all. But the British wanted to administer the coup de grace, and they thought, this guy Saud, these Saudis, they could help us. So they started bankrolling them. They started giving them money. And at the end of World War I, they favored the Saudis over the Hashemites and others to gain control of Arabia and help to establish the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Of course, the rest is history. The Saudis struck oil, and what did they use our oil money to do but spread Wahhabi Islam around the world? This reformist idea of Islam that is even more virulent and violent than other forms. So we have the British to thank for that, as for so much else. They are probably, I would say, the most responsible outside of the Saudis themselves for the spread of Wahhabi Islam around the world. When the Wahhabis did begin to spread their version of Islam around the world, there were many areas where jihad was essentially quiescent. This doesn't mean it was reformed or rejected. It was just ignored. As a matter of fact, one of the pamphlets that the Saudis distributed was called Jihad, the Forgotten Obligation. And they wanted to bring it all back, and they did. So we can thank King George, or whoever it was at that time, for this marvelous calculation. But of course, in all of these and so many other examples I could give you, and perhaps the most stinging is George W. Bush, when 6 days after 9/11, I wrote this book more or less chronologically. I don't usually do that, but this was a book of, as I said at the beginning, I've wanted to write this book for many years. I've had all this material and just haven't had the opportunity to put it all together. finally I got the opportunity last winter to put it all together, and I did, and I just started at the beginning and went all the way through, essentially most of the time. And so what happened was I got to 9/11 after I'd written 14 centuries of jihad activity. And I got to 6 days after 9/11 with all of this very much in my mind, just having set it down on paper. And there's George W. Bush in the mosque in front of Nihad Awad of CARE, which is tied to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, and Abdurrahman al-Amoudi of the American Muslim Council, who is now doing 23 years in prison. Well, his sentence was reduced by Obama, but he was sentenced to 23 years for financing al-Qaeda.
Did you guys catch that? So this guy, right? So now he's talking again about CARE, right? The Council on American Islamic Relations. And CARE was actually just recently designated as a terrorist organization, I believe, in Florida, and I want to say Texas. I'll have to look into this. I'm going to do an episode on that, but yeah. So I mean, it's a long time coming. The Muslim Brotherhood operates on, in various Western countries, um, under different names. They set up these like groups, they call themselves like in America, it's the, Council on American Islamic Relations. In Canada, it's something else. And they're incredibly litigious as well. But it's very interesting that a lot of people forget the fact that all these people who are being convicted of terrorism are linked to all of these so-called advocacy groups, right? And I mean, this guy is literally funding Al Qaeda, which is responsible for 9/11, and he's linked with all of these groups. So, guys, I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire, and pattern recognition is not Islamophobic. Pattern recognition is necessary in order to be able to properly identify and deal with the threat of Islamic terrorism and jihad.
Of jihad activity. And I got to 6 days after 9/11 with all of this very much in my mind, just having set it down on paper. And there's George W. Bush in the mosque in front of Nihad Awad of CARE, which is tied to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, and Abdurrahman al-Amoudi of the American Muslim Council, who is now doing 23 years in prison. Well, his sentence was reduced by Obama, but he was sentenced to 23 years for financing al-Qaeda. And he stands in front of them in the mosque in Washington and says Islam is a religion of peace. It really hit me after reading this uninterrupted, unmitigated, no let up jihad for 14 centuries. This guy says Islam is a religion of peace. Now, we know he had various political reasons for doing so, things that he thought would make things easier for our allies or whatever. We don't have to go over all that, at least not.
Thank you, Major. So Major says it was the genteel racism of the 19th century European drawing rooms that kept violent jihad alive as a concept long enough for Syed Qutb to enter the chat. You make a very interesting point there. And I mean, I have to look into that, and I have to like really try to understand why people in Europe thought that, how do I say this? Like, I'm just trying to understand, like, what made people in Europe think that these Islamic terrorists would be beneficial to them in any way? I don't know. I wonder if there's maybe an element of racism or Orientalism there, where they saw these people from the Middle East and they thought, okay, like these people are savage barbarians, whatever, they're easily controlled. Maybe that's the mistake they made, where they thought that they can control these people. I mean, that's certainly why Jimmy Carter backed the Islamic terrorists and backed Khomeini, because he was stupid enough to believe that he could control, this old man, old religious man. And then, of course, look how that played out. So, yeah, I wonder if there's like an element of just Orientalism there or racism. Um, and it's so frustrating that people in the West make the same mistake over and over again, where they assume that they can either trust or control these Islamic radicals, and the end result is literally always the same every single time. Yeah.
Not right now, maybe in the question period if you like. But George W. Bush was, in a short-sighted manner, actually enabling jihad activity by foreclosing upon an examination of the motivating ideology that gives fuel to it. And he was doing so on the basis of short-sighted political calculations, just as much as Count Julian was when he invited Tariq ibn Ziyad into Spain, and just as much as the British were when they funded the Wahhabis, and John VI Kantakouzenos was when he invited the Ottomans to fight his rival. It never ends up working out for the infidels, because the infidels have their own immediate goals, but the jihadis always have the goal of establishing Islamic law over the world, and will take and have taken throughout history any advantage in which to do that. So the history of jihad, I think, is one that it is extraordinarily important for people, especially in the government, in the military, to be aware of. You cannot solve the problem unless you know exactly the dimensions of the problem itself. And that is where we have so signally failed since 9/11, especially with the advent of Obama and his forbidding of any mention of Islam and jihad and counterterror training in 2011. So it is imperative that we...
Did you catch that? So one of Obama's policies was actually forbidding the gosh, I think I just went by, but like I need to catch that again. Like Obama literally said you can't talk about Islamic terrorism and jihad.
Obvious, of course, is immigration, the Trump travel bans. Is it really wise to bring in large Muslim populations into...
Wait, where was that? Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Unless you know exactly the... But the jihadis always have the goal of establishing Islamic law over the world, and will take and have taken throughout history any advantage in which to do that.
Yep.
So the history of jihad, I think, is one that it is extraordinarily important for people, especially in the government, in the military, to be aware of. You cannot solve the problem unless you know exactly the dimensions of the problem itself. And that is what...
So that's a very, very important statement he just made. That's something that I'm constantly saying as well. You can't solve the problem if you don't know what the problem is. I mean, think about the example I like to give is, a cancer patient, right? If they go to their doctor to get a diagnosis, and proper treatment, a doctor cannot properly treat their patient unless they know what's wrong with the patient. Like if the patient has cancer and the doctor, decides to give them, I don't know, treatment for diabetes, that's not going to solve the issue just because, because you're giving the wrong treatment because you haven't identified the cause of the problem. And it's the same exact thing when it comes to Islamic terrorism and jihad. And that's one of the reasons why I encourage people to make a distinction between Iran, which is, the country where I'm from, versus the Islamic Republic, which is occupying my country of Iran. Because prior to 1979, Iran was a normal, secular, modernizing country. Women were equal to men. Women were in parliament. Iran was actually the biggest ally of the United States in the Middle East. Iran was an ally of Israel. In fact, Iran was an ally, or on friendly terms with everyone. And it was only when the Islamic radicals took over in 1979 and imposed their Islamic jihadi ideology, and basically turned the country into a 7th century Islamic hellhole governed by Sharia law, that's when the anti Israel, anti US rhetoric began. And that's when Iran essentially became the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And so that's why I always find it frustrating when people, they talk about getting rid of Iran or attacking Iran. Um, Going after Iran in and of itself isn't going to do anything. I'm Iranian. Um, the country, I would say like 90% of the population are being oppressed by 10%. That 10% is linked to the Islamic Republic occupying it. So the issue is not Iran or Iranians. The issue is that Islamic jihadi ideology that is currently controlling the country, and Iran is a brutal Islamic dictatorship, right? And so again, like prior to 1979, Iran was a normal country, and it was only when the Islamic regime came into power and imposed their Islamic Sharia law, that's when the problems started. And so what Robert Spencer just said prior to this is so critical, right? Um, where is it? Here we go. He says, you cannot solve the problem unless you know exactly the dimensions of the problem itself. Such an important statement here.
Unless you know exactly the dimensions of the problem itself. And that is where we have so signally failed since 9/11, especially with the advent of Obama and his forbidding of any mention of Islam and jihad and counterterror training in 2011. So
makes you wonder why Obama would forbid that, because to me, that's pretty much treason. Those of us who are from the Middle East understand very well what Islamic terrorism and jihad looks like. And yet, unfortunately, there are certain bad actors out there who are um, funding lobbyists in the United States and Canada and elsewhere to push their Islamist ideology. And the fact that Obama just decided, there should be no mention of Islam or jihad in counterterrorism training, that is a very, very dangerous way to think. And to me, that's pretty much treason. Like, that's not in the interests of the American people.
it is imperative that we reacquaint ourselves with this history, that we ponder very carefully its implications for our stances toward various policy questions today. I mean, one of the most obvious, of course, is immigration, the Trump travel bans. Is it really wise to bring in large Muslim populations into the country? Obviously, not every Muslim we bring in is going to be a jihadi, but among them there will be, or at least people who think that Sharia ought to be the law of the land.
Yeah, I mean, statistics show that these are like studies done by FBI and like counterterrorism organizations. Roughly somewhere between 15 to 25% of Muslims are considered radical jihadis. 25% of 2 billion is a significant number.
How is that going to work out in terms of a tolerant and pluralistic society when you introduce this radically intolerant force? Another one is, of course, our alliances with Pakistan, with Turkey, where it's very clear that these entities are now on the other side, if they ever were not on the other side. And is it really prudent to keep pouring money into these countries when we've known for 10 years, for example, in regard to Pakistan, that they've been turning around and taking a great deal of it and giving it to the people they're supposed to be using it to fight? So not only do we need a reconfiguration of our international alliances, but a general reevaluation of our stance, also, of course, ultimately towards states like Saudi Arabia. It's very clear, of course, that the president is playing a very delicate game, a dangerous game, but one that probably has to be played in working with the Saudis against Iran. At the same time, we have to recognize that the Saudis ultimately are only going to be our friends to a certain degree. And that after that, there is the jihad imperative that overrides any possibility of any long-standing or deeply fruitful cooperation. But none of this can happen unless we recognize the problem to start with. It was because of this that I wrote this book. I hope that it will spark discussion on these issues in places where it can make a difference. And I thank you all for coming out to consider these things with me. If you have any questions, comments, death fatwas, whatever, I'm all ears. Thank you very much.
That little comment about the death fatwa. I mean, this guy probably has like, I don't know, dozens of death fatwas against him, because he's speaking out, and he's not afraid to call it for what it is. And what's really, we'll get to the question and answer period, because I want to hear that part as well. But what's really interesting is that everything that he just spoke about, it's based in history, it's based in fact, and yet some people would accuse him of Islamophobia just for the crime of repeating history, right? So it makes you wonder if just speaking out, about Islamic terrorism is considered Islamophobia. That says a lot. That says a lot about jihad. It also says a lot about how they have been silencing people who speak out for the last 1400 years, right?
I ask you, please, when you speak directly into the microphone, and wait until Jessica brings the microphone to you before you ask the question, so that your question may be immortalized. By the way, I wanted to also welcome a late arrival, Bud McFarland. President Reagan is with us.
The immortal Dr. Hull.
Robert, you're a good friend and a great American. Thank you for this incredible book, which is something that I think I have thought I needed in my own scholarship. So I'm really glad that you wrote it first.
I can't hear at all what the question is being asked, but hopefully Robert Spencer will repeat the question, because I can't. I don't know what's being asked right now.
What I wanted to ask you was, with respect to President Trump, what you would specifically recommend, given the beginning of the administration and given the beginning of his campaign, when he talked so much about radical Islamic terrorism, and then the dramatic decline in his mentions of radical Islamic terrorism as the administration was filled with people who disagreed with him on that, and as he went to Saudi Arabia and began to cut deals, what would you recommend to him in terms of actually winning this war? How can we translate the understanding of jihad into victory for the United States and for the Peace of Westphalia, for, as my colleague Lopez has said, for the free world at large?
Thank you. That's a great question. He doesn't really have to say anything as far as I'm concerned. It's much more important what he does. And I just mentioned in passing that Obama mandated that all mention of Islam and jihad be scrubbed from counterterror training. This is unbelievable. People have trouble believing this, but it's absolutely true. You can go online and look at the Countering Violent Extremism program. There is no mention, there's no hint in it that there's any problem with Islamic jihad. It doesn't exist. It's actually an elaborate exercise in pretending that it doesn't exist.
Major, have to run, but you might want to check out Bill Warner's video, Why We Are Afraid. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna make a note of that, and I'll see if I can. Pull that up here. Thank you so much, Major, and thank you for the support. Really appreciate that. Hope you're doing better. I think you mentioned a few nights ago you were in a car accident. I hope you're doing better. Make sure you get a lot of rest and take care of yourself. And thanks for being here with us, and thank you for your comments. Much appreciated. I'm gonna make a note of that, and I'm gonna find it.
That's what he should address. What I've been so signally disappointed by, and I hesitate to say this because he's done so remarkably well and surprisingly well in so many ways. Moving the embassy to Jerusalem, standing up to the violent intimidation that has hamstrung American foreign policy for so many years in that, and so many other things. But I've been sort of surprised and disappointed that he has not addressed this. He needs to open up, mandate, perhaps by an executive order or whatever engine would do it effectively, mandate that the FBI, that DHS, that the CIA, the Pentagon, all of them, that they not only are allowed to study Islam, but that they must. And that it must not be from these smooth apologists from the Council on American Islamic Relations and so on that have demonstrable ties to our enemies. But it has to be from people who are going to speak about it honestly and realistically. Now, he's going to catch hell for that because, of course, all the people who speak about it honestly and realistically are hate group leaders, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And so that has to be directly opposed and rebuked, and an unapologetic setting out of the necessity, going back to Sun Tzu, that you have to know your enemy. We have to understand this. And he could even say, you know, I wouldn't have any objection at all if he were to say that this might be a completely wrong understanding of Islam. I grant you, this could be twisted, hijacked, false Islam, and real Islam is as cuddly as it could possibly be. But we have to understand the motivating ideology of the enemy, and this is what it is. And so we're going to study it in depth instead of pretending it doesn't exist. And the Muslim Brotherhood elements, of course, in the U.S. government, that has to be also addressed as well. That people like Hisham Islam, who made sure that Major Stephen, Hisham Islam was the, I believe, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense? Advisor to Gordon England, who was the Assistant Secretary of Defense in George W. Bush's administration. That he obviously, he had ties to the Brotherhood and so on. And so why was he wielding this influence? He's the one who got Major Coughlin fired when Major Stephen Coughlin, who I'm sure many of you know, was the Pentagon's only expert on Islamic law. And so this is an issue that he needs to be made aware of, but I don't know that there's anybody around him who is telling him about it. I think we have to wait for the microphone. So, sorry. Thank you.
In the beginning of your talk, you mentioned the historic battles against Islamic invasion of Europe, the battle of Tours,
God, I can't hear the question.
And of course, this continued on until.
That's the one thing that I find like very frustrating about like these events. I don't know why, but the microphone never works. I mean, you would think that given how, common these sorts of events and talks are, that the organizers would at least have a microphone ready to go for the questions, especially if it's something that you're videotaping to broadcast later, because I mean, you'd think they would have figured it out by now.
The Muslims, the Ottomans were defeated at the gates of Vienna, also the Battle of Lepanto, by the Venetians. In the late into the 1700s, the Europeans showed great, they were full of antibodies against Islamic expansionism. But today, it's hard to find any antibodies in Europe. If I'm not mistaken, you're prohibited from taking a plane to London.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
There are a lot of other subversives.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, extreme Islamists are admitted to
Stanford.
Stanford?
Yes.
Close. It's from-
I'm supposed to go to Berkeley in a couple weeks. I'm really looking forward to that.
But, I mean, I'm sure you probably have never been invited, hardly ever invited to university to give a talk, an official talk there, or where.
No, when I get invited to speak at universities, it's by the College Republicans or Young America's Foundation, a group like that. I've never been invited by the university administrators ever. And when I am invited to a university, it's as if Jack the Ripper has been invited. And there is an uproar like you wouldn't believe. And it's very clear that what we see is the fruit of indoctrination, that these children have been told that Islamophobia is a big problem. And Islamic Jihad terror is really something that's just a manifestation of a reaction to American imperialism and the state of Israel.
That's exactly what happened after October 7. So you have, Hamas terrorists who go out and they wage war and they slaughter 1,200 innocent Israelis, in the name of Allah and Islam. And, they're yelling Allahu Akbar while they're murdering Jewish people and, taking hostages. And it wasn't even just Hamas terrorists. It was Palestinian civilians themselves who were getting involved and cheering and yelling and spitting on the bodies of murdered Jews. And yet, instead of people pointing out the problem with Islamic terrorism, all of a sudden you had all these Muslim advocacy groups in the West talking about, Islamophobia and how is this going to affect the Muslim community, and and then you had the others who were basically blaming the United States and Israel for this violent genocidal attack by Islamic terrorists, right? That's exactly what happened after October 7. And this is a speech from 2018, and at that point the pattern was already prevalent and people were noticing it. And unfortunately, the situation hasn't gotten better. I think, in fact, it's only gotten worse because, yeah, like this is so true. Like, I want to replay this part, but just think about it. Think about what sort of narrative all these like Muslim advocacy groups and all the communists and socialists and progressives were putting out there after October 7. It's exactly the narrative that Robert Spencer here is talking about back in 2018.
That's why I wrote the book. I know that probably most college students will never hear about it.
The libraries got it?
Some of them will, yeah, absolutely. But I can't. I don't have any control over how much it's distributed or who reads it. But this is one of the reasons why I wrote it, as a contribution to try to correct this.
Wait, maybe I went back. Here we go. Sorry. This is the part.
Group like that. I've never been invited by the university administrators ever. And when I am invited to a university, it's as if Jack the Ripper has been invited. And there is an uproar like you wouldn't believe. And it's very clear that what we see is the fruit of indoctrination, that these children have been told that Islamophobia is a big problem. And Islamic Jihad terror is really something that's just a manifestation of a reaction to American imperialism and the state of Israel. And this is one of the reasons why.
And that's exactly what we saw right after the genocidal massacre of 1,200 Israelis on October 7.
I wrote the book. I know that probably most college students will never hear about it.
The libraries got it?
Some of them will, yeah, absolutely. But I can't. I don't have any control over how much it's distributed or who reads it. But this is one of the reasons why I wrote it, as a contribution to try to correct this. You're absolutely right. That thank you. Really, up until about 1970, everybody knew that I wasn't saying it then. I was 8, but everybody knew that what I'm saying is true. Everybody knew that Islam was not a religion of peace. Winston Churchill says this. John Quincy Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams, despite the myth making about Thomas Jefferson nowadays. Everybody took these things for granted. It was obvious. But there has been a concerted effort at disinformation and rewriting of history that has been remarkably effective, and that we need to be energetically counteracting. Thank you.
So it took 700 years to get the Muslims out of Spain.
Can you speak right into-
It took 700 years to get the Muslims out of Spain.
There you go.
I said it 3 times. It took 700 years to get the Muslims out of Spain. We had forefathers that fought them, like Oglethorpe in Georgia. How do we remove these people? Because basically they're not going to be part of American culture. They're not going to be part of it. Now they're in political offices, they're mayors, they're setting up Sharia law. How do you remove these people? I know what they used to do to remove them. But, okay, what's your opinion on that?
Well, you know,
Enemy within. You wrote that book, right?
no, I didn't, but it's a good title. Terrific title. I wish I had. In any case, what do we do? That's right, Trevor Loudon. What do we do about this? Of course, we have to be true to our own principles, and that means that something like mass deportation or something of this kind, this is not even on the table, of course, nowadays. What we need to do are some things that I think would be very simple and effective and ought to be common sense measures that would go a long way to solving this problem. One is enforce our own laws and be consistent in that enforcement. There should be one law. It was actually the great achievement of Western civilization that there's one law for everybody. That this is the Magna Carta, people. You know that there's not one law for the nobleman and the other law for the commoners. It's one law for everyone. Everyone is responsible in the same way. And so if we were to enforce that, then polygamists, for example, would be arrested. Those who practice female genital mutilation, those who violate any number of other American laws that are already at variance with Sharia principles. If we were to make it clear that those laws would be enforced, then the followers of Sharia would have the choice to either renounce those aspects of Islam in a genuine and sincere way, or leave the country. But they're not going to be able to have both. Also, of course, you have laws against subversion and sedition, which would mean that even this preaching that Sharia ought to be the law of the land eventually would be something that would be legally actionable. These things are already laws that are on the books. It's just that they're not being applied. Ibrahim Hooper of CARE, there was a house fire a few years back in the Bronx, and this guy was killed, and his wives. And so the New York Times rather blandly noted he had 3 or 4 wives. He was a Muslim, and Ibrahim Hooper was trotted out from the Council on American Islamic Relations to say, yeah, there are, I believe he said 50,000 Muslims and polygamous arrangements in the United States. And then the New York Times moved on, of course, to something else, probably Islamophobia backlash. But wait a minute, that's illegal in the United States. The Latter-day Saints Church had to change its doctrine to get Utah admitted as a state. And so why are we tolerating this now? And these questions remain unanswered. Why indeed? Why has there been no prosecution?
Have you guys heard about that case in, I think it's, I don't know if it's in the UK. It's like this one country in Europe. Let me find it. And this Muslim guy is basically making a human rights case for why he should be able to so the guy has like 4 wives. He lives in, okay, you know what? Let me find it. Let me see if I can find it. Oh yeah, here we go. Here we go. This is get this. Wait. Close. What is this? Okay, yeah, here I found it. I found it. So like what Robert Spencer was speaking about in 2018 about, how, why is polygamy in Muslim communities being tolerated? It's not just like a fantasy or like a made up thing. Like it's first of all, it's happening in various countries. There's lots of people who've spoken about that, but now they're even taking it a step further. Look at this. So this is a case that's currently happening in in Europe right now. So let me just read it for you. Could polygamy become legal in Europe? A Yemeni asylum seeker has taken his case to the European Court of Human Rights after Dutch authorities refused to allow his children from his second and third wives to join him. The outcome could set a precedent. The so called right to family life may open the door to legal recognition of polygamous family structures in Europe. For the first time in its history, the Strasbourg based European Court of Human Rights is set to rule on a case directly linked to polygamy. Khalid Al Anesi, a Yemeni lawyer who was granted asylum in the Netherlands after the Arab Spring, claims that the refusal to permit family reunification for his 5 children violates the right to respect for family life under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. After fleeing Yemen, Al Anesi brought his first wife and their 8 children to the Netherlands under family reunification rules. First wife and 8 children. So they're already in the Netherlands. However, he did not bring his second and third wives as polygamy is illegal and not recognized in the country. Later, he applied to have the 5 children born of those wives join him. Dutch authorities rejected the request, stating that the children are safe and under protection with their mothers in Turkey, where they hold refugee status, rendering the current application unwarranted. Officials also suggested that Al Anesi could divorce his other wives in order to allow the children's family reunification based entry, an option he flatly refused. So here's where it opens up the back door for polygamy. Al Anesi now argues that the Dutch state is violating his right to family life. The court therefore faces a fundamental question. Should a European country, in the name of human rights, recognize a polygamous family structure even where polygamy is explicitly prohibited by law? From a legal standpoint, the issue is not the formal recognition of polygamy itself, but whether children from such marriages have the right to live with their father in the host country. However, if the ECHR were to rule in Al Anesi's favor, it could create a loophole. Children, and indirectly their mothers, might invoke human rights protections to secure residence, thereby circumventing national bans on polygamy without directly violating them. The court has accepted the appeal, though the Netherlands has not yet submitted a response. A ruling in the Al Anesi case is expected in 2026. So, yeah, this is how you know certain Muslims are taking advantage of laws that were specifically created, for a society that only recognizes marriage between one man and one woman. It doesn't recognize polygamous marriages, and they're trying to take advantage of the system because if if he's able to bring in the children from his other wives, then that means that the country is now indirectly recognizing the validity of polygamous marriages. And then once those children come in, those children could then bring in their mothers through visa applications, right? So this is a big deal, guys. This is a big deal, and this is happening today, literally, right now. The case is set to be heard in 2026, but Robert Spencer here, like he's talking about this back in 2018. So I mean, this is not a new phenomenon. This has been going on for quite a while. I have seen videos. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, which is why I haven't really spoken about it. I like to operate based on facts, things that are proven essentially. But I mean, I've seen people online, Americans, who have been complaining about, certain families, and not just Americans, but British people as well, who've been complaining about how apparently there are, um, you know, polygamous Muslim families who are living in the UK or in the United States, and they are getting benefits. So, I mean, I'd have to do more research into that, but it's not a far fetched thing to think about. And yeah, that's exactly what Robert Spencer here is talking about the threat of of polygamous marriages, right? So I'll go back a little bit. Here we go. I'll go back a little bit. Okay. Oh, we have a comment here. Canada for Israel. Yeshua is salvation. Read your uncorrupted Bible and blessings. Isaiah 52, 13, 53, 12. Okay, I will. I'm not a big religious reader, but I will definitely make a note of that. And yeah, I'll check it out for sure. Thank you for that, Canada for Israel. Appreciate that.
That even this preaching that Sharia ought to be the law of the land eventually would be something that would be legally actionable. These things are already laws that are on the books. It's just that they're not being applied. Ibrahim Hooper of CARE, there was a house fire a few years back in the Bronx, and this guy was killed and his wives. And so the New York Times rather blandly noted he had 3 or 4 wives. He was a Muslim, and Ibrahim Hooper was trotted out from the Council on American Islamic Relations to say, yeah, there are, I believe he said 50,000 Muslims and polygamous arrangements in the United States.
Oh, okay. So they've already admitted there's at least 50,000 Muslims where men have more than one wife, and they're living in the United States. Okay, good to know. And this was 2018, guys. This is 2018. So you can only imagine how much the number has increased since then, especially due to mass migration. And again, remember, the Council on American Islamic Relations was recently listed as a foreign terrorist entity, I believe in Florida and I think Texas. Yeah, just like it literally just happened because of their ties to the Muslim Brotherhood.
And then the New York Times moved on, of course, to something else, probably Islamophobia backlash. But wait a minute, that's illegal in the United States. The Latter-day Saints Church had to change its doctrine to get Utah admitted as a state. And so why are we tolerating this now? And these questions remain unanswered. Why indeed? Why has there been no prosecution? Why are there only 2 doctors now? That it's only been since Trump took office that anybody was ever prosecuted for female genital mutilation. These 2 doctors who are still on trial in Detroit. You can't tell me they're the first ones that ever did it in the United States. There are thousands of people who have suffered this in the United States, and nothing's been done. So my first recommendation is enforce our own laws.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Besides Count Julian,
Yes,
there were other traitors,
lots of them.
including Catholic Archbishop.
Yeah, what's his name? Opas?
Uh,
I have him in the book. Yeah.
I think that's the name.
Yeah, he's the guy who told Pelayo. I don't mean to, if you were going to tell the story, go ahead.
No.
Pelayo was the last holdout. I hope you will all be Pelayos if it comes to this. When all of Spain was conquered, there was this one guy, and he wasn't going to play. And he went up on top of a mountain with a small band of followers, and the Muslims tried to get at him, but he was up a mountain. And so he was able to rain down stones upon the jihadis and keep them from coming up. And eventually they said, what do we care about this band of barbarians perched on a rock? They'll die off. But Opas was a bishop, a Spanish bishop in the tradition of Pope Francis. And
Oh, I see a comment from, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but the UAE has also sanctioned CARE due to its ties with Qatar 100%. I've actually spoken about this in the past in both my live streams and also in other short videos that I have made. Yes, the United Arab Emirates has banned the Muslim Brotherhood. Saudi Arabia has banned the Muslim Brotherhood. Egypt has banned the Muslim Brotherhood. Bahrain, and I believe Jordan as well. They have all banned the Muslim Brotherhood, and the UAE is actively fighting both the Muslim Brotherhood and Qatar as well. Qatar is, one of the biggest sponsors of the Muslim Brotherhood. Thank you for the comment and support. I appreciate that.
He went to Pelayo and he said, I believe that you now understand how the entire army of the Goths cannot resist the force of the Muslims. How then can you resist on this mountain? Listen to my advice, abandon your efforts, and you will enjoy many benefits alongside the Muslims. Pope Francis is, he had to have, he's the worthy successor of Opas, the bishop in Spain.
The question is, isn't it true that we will face such traitors here in the West?
Oh, yeah.
Europe, etc. When push comes to shove, we will have these problems.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Obviously, I am classifying Pope Francis as chief among them, that in shaming the Christians of Europe and telling them that they're not good Christians unless they accept the Muslim migrants, and saying that there should be no walls. Well, tear down your Vatican walls, pal. But the Vatican walls were put up in the year 846 after the Muslims sacked Rome. They couldn't actually get in because of the existing walls, and the ones that are there are reinforcements of those, because they made some breaches and they sacked St. Peter's, which was outside the walls at the time, and St. Paul outside the walls. So he should think back on the example of his predecessors, but no, he's the woke pope, and he's not going to do that. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for presenting us on this Q&A. I have a couple comments regarding the unequivocal laws. So my daughters have always gone to Christian and Catholic schools, and we've had a chance to play all of the Islamic academies. The guarded one with guns that you have to enter off of 123 to one in Alexandria, and the new King Abdullah Golden Lane School.
You play in sports?
We play basketball there.
Oh, my.
And soccer, and,
Their team is the bomb.
so
Yeah.
in past games, if you go to the restrooms, they only bring out bar soap in the bathrooms for.
I have no idea what question she's asking.
Let's-
Something to do with schools. I can't hear.
So we would then close down. Second, I don't really understand how these schools can get along with segregated classrooms and how that's allowed in America.
Well, see, these things are all allowed in America now because we're not enforcing the laws. The ACLU fought for decades to get Christian prayer out of the schools, right? And now in Texas, there's a public school that has an Islamic prayer room. And the Attorney General of the state of Texas wrote to them and said, we have this thing, separation of church and state. You got to close down the Islamic prayer room. And they refused. So what's he going to do? Call out the National Guard? He didn't do anything. They still have their prayer room. And he ought to get police and go in there and say this is illegal. But instead, it's happening all over the country. I was debating a couple of imams a few years back in University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. And I went into the men's room. It's a public university. There's a foot bath for the Islamic prayers. And I looked around. There were no holy water fonts. It was very strange. It seems as if there's only accommodation at public expense of one religion only.
And
But
my nephew is studying international relations at the Middle Eastern minor.
Yeah, that's sort of how the creep sets in, right? Like it starts small, and then eventually you have taxpayer dollars funding religious accommodations where, I am more of a secular type of person. I don't think there should be anything religious or religious accommodation in schools, especially not for religious minorities. When it comes to Christian countries. I mean, it was built and founded on Christianity. So I think anyone who immigrates to a Christian country, you should become very comfortable and familiar with Christian traditions and the Christian religion, and maybe not be so offended. And if you don't like it, just go live in a Muslim country that caters to your religious needs. I mean, it's just how I see it. I mean, I remember when my parents first immigrated to Canada back in 1986, and I went to school. Um, what was it? I guess it would have been like, I think it was 1989. I was like 4 years old, and there's like video footage of me as like a 4-year-old child. We'd only been in Canada 3 years at that point, and my kindergarten had, like my junior kindergarten, basically had. It wasn't a holiday party; it was a Christmas party. It was literally called a Christmas party. I remember, well, I don't remember. It's the video footage that my parents took. Santa Claus came and he was giving Christmas gifts, and we were all dressed up like Christmas carolers. And you know what? Actually, I'll see if I can find it. I'll see if I can find that. I'm sure I think I made like a tongue in cheek comment about Christmas. Let me see here. Where was it? I've spoken about this before. Um, I remember, like, what was it? Here we go. Here we go. So, okay, so this is how like ridiculous things have gotten in Canada. So, in 2023, the Canadian Human Rights Commission report claimed that Christmas is discriminatory, and observance of Jesus' birth is an obvious example of religious bias rooted in colonialism. Like, this is just how ridiculous the narrative has gotten. And then I kind of, responded with, tongue in cheek comment. And I just kind of said, according to Canadian human rights, here I am being discriminated against by Christmas in 1989. I was in junior kindergarten, 4 years old. My immigrant religious minority parents were so upset. They dressed me up in a cute winter outfit and filmed the entire shocking incident. So there you go. There's me as a 4-year-old, sitting in Santa's lap. You can see the date there as well, 1989. That's my kindergarten class. And yeah, like it's just so ridiculous that people um, immigrate to Christian countries and then they complain about being discriminated against. I mean, if you're immigrating to a Christian country, you're going there for a reason. Maybe you should actually try to assimilate and take part in the culture, because it can be very, very fun to do so. And yeah, like if you want um, certain cultures or values, find a country that has those cultures and values. Like, don't go to a country and then try to impose um, your own beliefs on everyone else. And certainly you shouldn't be asking the government to spend US tax dollars. I mean, I think that's just absolutely ridiculous. And I feel like it's gotten way too far, to the point where now in Canada, in Canada, you literally have this Canadian Human Rights Commission report claiming that Christmas is discriminatory, which is one of the most ridiculous and idiotic things I have ever heard of. I'm not Christian, and yet I have no problem saying Merry Christmas. When I was a politician in Ontario, I sent out Christmas cards that specifically said Merry Christmas on it. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Yeah, and I just miss being able to just go. I just wish things would go back to the way they were before all of this like DEI and woke nonsense and like mass migration started happening. I mean, the Canada of today is not the same Canada that my parents immigrated to in 86, unfortunately. Certainly not even the Canada of the last 10, 15 years, I would say. So yeah, it's just it's ridiculous how far the rhetoric is going. So on one hand, you have people who are putting out these human rights reports saying that Christmas is discriminatory, and all of that, but then at the same time, um, they're bringing in, or like forcing all these other like holidays and religions on people, in the name of multiculturalism and diversity. Like it's the double standard is insane, and I quite frankly am getting sick and tired of it. I mean, my parents immigrated to a Christian country built by white people for a reason.
Scholarship, and this is at GW University. And he and I have significant debates, and I really don't understand how a university such as GW cannot be teaching true Islam to those young people who are minoring or majoring in Middle Eastern studies.
I'll tell you something. I doubt there's a single university in the country that speaks honestly about these issues. I was at Cal Poly. I was speaking at Cal Poly University in San Luis Obispo, California. Very pretty place. And I was speaking about this, how universities today, they're one-party states, and there's only one point of view allowed. And that's the far left point of view, and the corollary idea that Islam is a religion of peace that has, as Hillary Clinton said, nothing whatsoever to do with terrorism. And so I was at Cal Poly and I was challenging them about this. And I said, for example, I'll bet that the point of view that I represent, that there are texts of the Quran and teachings of Muhammad and rulings of Islamic law that justify violence against unbelievers and have been acted upon by Muslims throughout history, that is nowhere ever discussed in any of your classes that touch on Islam. And this one girl said, oh no, we talked about your book just last week. And I said, oh really? And what did you say? And she said that hate speech is not free speech. And see, what they taught them was that I was purveying hate speech, which ought not to have First Amendment protection. It ought to be forcibly suppressed by government agencies. And this is very, very common in American universities today. And I think that, well, of course, the corruption of the academy started in earnest in the 1960s with the long march through the institutions that the hard left began at that time. And it becomes a self-perpetuating thing. One leftist professor gets in, and then he recommends his friend, and then a little while later, they're the hiring board, and they only hire their own people. And now it's all completely closed off to any truth about these issues. Of course, then also there's the Saudi money. Georgetown University has the Prince Al-Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim Christian Understanding. They got, I believe it was 12 million from Al-Walid, who's a Saudi prince, to 20. I thought it was 20, half to Harvard and half to Georgetown. No, 20 to Georgetown. Great. And so,
Guys, I did a live stream on how corrupt bad actors and um, foreign governments who are hostile to the United States are funding American universities and indoctrinating young people. So what he's talking about here, if you're interested in learning more, I actually did the live stream a couple days ago. Let me find it here just really quickly so I can show it to you guys. If you're interested in learning more on that particular topic. So it's I still have to make like a title screen for it. But this one here, Qatar 101 Part 2. I still have to like put in the description there, but that's basically a 2.5-hour live stream that I did where I played a whole bunch of different videos talking about bad actors that are funding American universities for nefarious reasons. So you definitely want to make sure that you check that out because that goes more in depth into what Robert Spencer is talking about here right now.
so if you look at the Al-Walid Center and the Bridge Initiative that comes from it, it's all dedicated to fighting Islamophobia and got dossiers on all the people who are so evil who talk about how they get the crazy idea that Islam is not peaceful. and they do bamboozle a lot of people in this way. Of course, Georgetown is the worst, but there are many other universities that have taken the Saudi money. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, the microphone. Yes, I forgot about. Hey, I think I know you back in the dark.
Thank you. Thank you, TFDX. Yeah, I'm kind of happy. I'm still kind of adjusting a few things with my office in the background, but I'm pretty happy with the way I have it set up. But if you guys have any suggestions, let me know. But yeah, this is one of the reasons why I was away for a couple of weeks. I was changing locations. I was getting things set up, and of course, you can see I have my office here behind me. And yeah, I also, you know what? I also have this, if you guys haven't seen it. So my scales of justice, but you can't really see it because it sits right, it sits right behind me in my chair. But I'm glad you guys like it. And oh, let me fix this a little bit here. Moved it around. All right. Yeah, if you have any suggestions, let me know. But no, thank you for that. And thank you for the support. It's good to be back.
How are you? Likewise.
Speaking of trainers, can you comment on how common learning and the SARSA
Sure. Linda Sarsour, of course, is one of the most interesting and paradoxical figures of our time. I know she's really irritating, but
Linda Sarsour was also one of the main backers of Zoran Mamdani, and she basically admitted that the vast majority of the funding for Mamdani's campaign came through her and her Muslim network. So, yeah, like she has been a problematic figure for a while. And, even here, Robert Spencer is sounding the alarm on her back in 2018. And then, look what they were able to accomplish in 2025 because people are not taking the threat seriously.
just a minute, if you ponder with me, a feminist icon who wears a hijab, the leader of the Women's March on Washington the day after Trump is inaugurated, and she's wearing this and says, "That's my choice." And meanwhile,
Yeah, hijab is not a choice.
there are untold numbers. We'll never know the number of women who've been brutalized and killed for not wearing the hijab. We know that Aqsa Parvez in Mississauga, Ontario in 2007 was strangled to death by her father and her brother with the hijab she would not wear. We know, I have a long list that I keep current at Jihad Watch whenever.
And of course, guys, the most recent example of that Syrian girl, remember? Syrian girl killed by... It was like an honor killing, right? Like that's just the most recent example here. Ryan, here we go. Is it this one? It was Ryan al-Najjar. Yeah, geez, let me find it. Yeah, this one here. It's so sad, right? So this is the most recent case of a young Muslim woman being murdered by her family because she wanted to take off the hijab. Brothers drowned teenage sister in swamp in honor killing. Court here. Syrian father allegedly ordered his sons to kill his 18-year-old daughter in the Netherlands after discovering she had a boyfriend. Yeah, so there you go. You can look that up. Her name is Ryan. Her name is Ryan al-Najjar. Yeah, it's a very, very sad story. So don't ever believe anyone who says that hijab is a choice. It's not.
Whenever I come across a story, and now it's this long, of women who have been threatened, who've been killed, who have been brutalized for not wearing the hijab. The very idea of the hijab is inherently misogynistic. Do you know why women have to wear the hijab? Yeah.
So they don't get raped.
Yes, they have to. It's a woman's responsibility to make sure a man is not tempted. And so apparently the temptation in here is in the hair. So The hair has to be covered. The harmful hair rays have to be extinguished. And if the man is still tempted, if the woman is raped or attacked, it's her fault. She did not succeed in extinguishing the temptation. And that is why we have the niqab and the burqa. Because if the hijab doesn't do it, then cover the face. If the covering the face doesn't do it, cover the eyes. And what you have then is an inherently misogynistic garment that is a symbol very neatly and clearly of the oppression of women and the second-class status of women in Islamic law. So you have this woman who's wearing it very proudly and lying about it. She's openly pro-Sharia. She's got familial ties to Hamas. She has said that she wants to mutilate the women who are opposing jihad. She named Brigitte Gabriel and Ayaan Hirsi Ali. And this is somebody who's celebrated.
I've featured interviews by both Ayaan Hirsi Ali and Brigitte Gabriel in my previous live stream, so you make sure to check those out as well.
As a great hero. She was just arrested a couple days ago at the hearing for, she wanted to get arrested. It was a stunt that she was showing again how terrible this Kavanaugh is and how it's part of the breakdown of the civility in the American society and the extreme polarization. But what she is trying to do actually is normalize, tell them I'm not here, is normalize the idea that, just snub them. I wouldn't answer either. Anyway, normalize the idea that hijab is completely ordinary, is something that we're going to have to get used to seeing, that it is something that represents the marvelous diversity of American culture. And you notice that this diversity is in favor of this radically oppressive and intolerant belief system. You also have, you asked about Kaepernick. How do you?
Yeah, I mean, like at some point, we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, is it really diversity to normalize an ideology that says women need to cover their hair in order to prevent themselves from being raped? I mean, that's literally victim blaming mentality, and I don't think that has, any sort of place. I don't know, like it's just I mean, I don't let me put it this way. I don't have an issue per se with women covering their hair. It's more so when they cover their face and their eyes. At that point, I'm like, okay, so why are you in Western society? Why are you in Western culture? There are a lot of religions where men and women cover their hair for various reasons. Now, of course, in Islam, the reason that women cover their hair is because basically to avoid, tempting men or whatever the case might be. I don't know of any other religion um, that says you have to cover your hair in order to prevent being raped. But again, like you do you. If that's what you want to believe, fine, go ahead. But I definitely do have a problem with the face covering and the burqa, and I don't think that that is appropriate at all. Not just in Western society. I don't think that's appropriate in any society. It is definitely a tool of oppression. And it's really unfortunate that you have women who have been indoctrinated and brainwashed into thinking that they need to cover their faces um, in order to prevent them from being raped. It's just a very, very backwards mentality, and I think we do need to call it out the same way that we call out other harmful practices against women, for example, female genital mutilation, and other harmful things, child marriage, things like that. Like at some point we have to stand up and be like, okay, just because you think that's culturally appropriate doesn't mean that it's okay, right? Like just because someone says this is my culture, this is my belief, doesn't make it okay, doesn't make it appropriate. If that was how we always operated, then we as humanity would never have evolved and gotten to the place where we are today. And that's because we have specifically um, modernized our way of thinking when it comes to a lot of issues.
How do you say his name? I don't know. I don't follow football, but I know I looked it up the other day that the 49ers, when he was quarterback in 2016, were 1-10, and not. It's interesting to note that the great football fan Mahmoud Ahmadinejad tweeted the other day that this is the best quarterback in the league, and he doesn't have a contract. Obviously, this is the Iranians want to exploit the divisions in American society, and so they take this anti-American.
By Iranians, he of course means the Islamic Republic occupying Iran, not us Iranians who are fighting against the regime to reclaim our country.
Figure and exalt him. And of course, everything is so confused and polarized in America today. You even have Nike exalting him. And it's good to see that Nike.
Oh, I have a question from the audience. Let's see. Be careful who you trust. Spencer can be a bit wild. Douglas Murray is a superior commentator. Oh yeah, I definitely want to. I'm definitely going to be playing Douglas Murray as well. Let me just make a note here. I literally have a list of all these things that I want to do and all these people that I want to play. Douglas Murray is definitely on the list. I actually got to meet him a couple of years ago. Fantastic person, and yeah, I have so much respect for him and what he's doing as well. His book is quite good. Stay safe. Also, what's your next big move? Canadian political podcast. Oh wow. Well, I'm definitely working on this YouTube channel, of course. I'm doing a lot of live streams, and my YouTube channel has actually grown significantly thanks to you guys and all of your support. When I started my live streams on October 1st, I was at less than 2,000 followers. I think I was at 1,600 followers. And right now, I think I'm just over 27,000. My videos are getting a lot of views. I'm getting a lot more subscribers. So yeah, there seems to be a lot of interest in my content, in the videos I'm putting out. If you follow me on Instagram or on TikTok, you might have also seen my very viral, Iranian here with another pro tip videos. I also post them on YouTube, but it's really strange because they haven't gotten a lot of views or reach on YouTube. I mean, a video that I post on Instagram, like one of my Iranian here videos, I get it gets anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million views on average. Whereas on YouTube, it's stuck somewhere around 30, I don't know, 20 to 50,000. I have one which is now starting to go a little bit viral, but it still hasn't reached my YouTube. It still hasn't reached my Instagram or TikTok numbers. But I think I have to play around with the SEO a little bit on YouTube. I think I have to make them more search friendly. So I'm going to be, working on that, going back and redoing some of my old videos with the description and things like that. But yeah, right now I'm focused on growing this channel because there seems to be a lot of interest, a lot of appetite in learning more about Islamic terrorism and jihad, and of course my experience as an Iranian. And I just want to thank all of you guys for your support. I mean, you're helping me do all this. I'm also working on a book. It was supposed to come out this past weekend, but it's been pushed back mainly because all of a sudden I was presented with an opportunity to grow, and that's why you see me in a new space right now, in a new office. So I decided to push my book back a little bit, but I am working on a book that's going to be coming out on January 4. And yeah, at this point, it's just seeing how much interest there is. So if you guys are interested in supporting me and supporting this channel, you're also welcome to become a paid member. I think membership is about $10 a month, and very, very soon, I'm going to start doing members only live streams as well, and also members only content, because that will give you guys an opportunity to, that will give me an opportunity to be able to be more active in the chat as well. Oh, thank you so much. So the book is called Pro Tips from an Iranian. I mean, I can pull it up for you if you want. It's okay. No, I think it was yeah, I have to go back and I have to fix it on Amazon. Oh my gosh, I don't know why it's not there. But it's called Pro Tips from an Iranian. It's going to be out in a little bit, and yeah, I'm very, very excited about that. So definitely want to stay tuned for that. And yeah, thank you so much for the support, and yeah, for everyone who's watching, like, subscribe, share my videos. And yes, the membership option is open. We have members only message board, and very soon I'm going to be doing members only live streams. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate the support.
That Nike lost $3.5 billion today. So there are still some people who object, but these are directly anti-American initiatives. The exaltation of these people is directly anti-American and in service. I think Ahmadinejad's tweet about Kaepernick, it shows vividly that what this is about is in service of the jihad, to weaken American society so that ultimately it collapses and can be replaced by a Sharia state. That may be fanciful, but the efforts to destroy American society in service of that fanciful goal is not fanciful at all. Yes.
First of all, thank you for a superb presentation.
Thank you.
Two very quick questions. One, you mentioned in the 1960s when we began to see the change in academic study or
Yes.
exposition of Islam. Who were some of the leading purveyors of alternate history, for lack of a better phrase? And I'll leave it at that. I have another question if I have time later on.
Okay, sure. The primary person that you can credit, although his influence it has to come from other sources. The fact that he became so wildly influential, but the primary person responsible for the obfuscation in Middle East studies, for the extinguishing of true teaching about Islam, and the introduction of all these politically correct falsehoods is Edward Said. Edward Said, of course, was a Christian Arab who was the author of a book called Orientalism, in which he explained that it was essentially a colonialist enterprise to criticize Islam. That if you were criticizing Islam, it was only in service of destroying the Islamic world such that it could be colonized by the West. And that therefore all criticism of Islam essentially had to be rejected by anybody who was against imperialism.
So it sounds like it was more ideological than theological on his part.
Yeah, it wasn't theological at all on his part. I mean, you can't really sustain the idea that Islam is a religion of peace in any honest manner. I tell you something, sometimes, I mean, I get people telling me I'm an idiot all the time, and maybe they're right, but Tahir al-Qadri is a Pakistani theologian who wrote a 512-page fatwa proving that Islam is a religion of peace. And I get people...
I find it very funny when non-Arab Muslims are even more like radicalized than Arab Muslims. Like, do they not understand that the only reason they're Muslim is because they were invaded and colonized by the Arab Muslim invaders? It's wild to me. It's wild to me.
People, even now, especially when it came out, I would get people writing me every couple days saying, "Why don't you read Tahir al-Qadri? And then you will see that you are Islamophobe." And so I read it. And it was very helpful that it was available in a PDF, excuse me, that was searchable. So I searched for 2-191, which is kill them wherever you find them. I searched for 489, which is kill them wherever you find them. I searched for 95, which is kill the idolaters wherever you find them. I searched for 929, which is fight against those who don't believe in Allah on the last day and do not forbid what he has forbidden, even if they are of the people of the book, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. I searched for 47.4. When you meet the unbelievers, strike the necks. I searched for 860. Strike terror in the hearts of the enemies of Allah. I searched for 151. Soon we will strike terror, we meaning Allah, in the hearts of the unbelievers. And on and on and on. Not one of them was mentioned. So 512 pages of blather where he never even addressed the passages of the Quran that jihadis use to justify violence and make recruits among peaceful Muslims. That's how they convince people that Islam is a religion of peace. And so some non-Muslim reads Tahir al-Qadri and thinks, oh, well, this is a respected Islamic theologian who's showing that Islam is a religion of peace. He doesn't know what's in the Quran. He doesn't know those verses to search for. They fall for it. And there are many, many examples of expositions of that kind. You don't find, you can't find, because Islam is not a religion of peace, any honest appraisal of how the Quran's violent verses don't really have any force in the modern age. You will find people saying, oh, that only applies to the 7th century, which in the first place contradicts the idea that the Quran is the perfect book that's the perfect guide for human behavior for all time. And then we hear, oh yeah, but large portions of it only apply to 1400 years ago. It doesn't.
I would say that the Yazidis would have an issue with that statement. I would say that Iraqi Christians would have an issue with that statement. In fact, I would say everyone in Iran would have an issue with that statement, given that those exact principles are being used to colonize, oppress, and murder Iranians in the last 47 years in the name of Allah and Islam.
It doesn't make any sense. But secondly, if you say that the Quran's passages only apply to a very strictly circumscribed period of time, then you've got to deal with the fact that all throughout history, Muslims misunderstood that and behaved violently on the basis of these passages. And so you've got the most spectacular failure to communicate the truths of the religion that has ever been in the history of the world, in any religion. And so it just doesn't make any sense either way. I don't know. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for being the truth.
Thank you.
And your mention of John Brennan caught my attention because I'm a former intelligence officer. And I suspect he's the only director of CIA who ever voted for the country's candidate in the election. He wasn't the only one who imposed the no discussion of Islam on the intelligence community. But that is not Robert, I might add, that was indeed the FBI.
Yes.
Would you care to give us your assessment of the role of the intelligence community in dumbing down our appreciation of Islam?
Well, the intelligence community has done a grave disservice to our understanding of the threat by partnering with people who represent aspects of the threat. I mean, you have the extraordinarily strange situation of the Justice Department determining that CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America, are tied to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. And then you have the FBI having them to lunch and consulting with them. And the amount of interaction is actually extraordinary. People don't know. Pamela Geller and I did a Freedom of Information Act years ago, way back in 2011 or 12. We did a FOIA request on the interaction of the FBI with CARE and ISNA. And we got a stack of documents this high that they said, this is the first volume. We'll get you the rest later. They never did. But in that, there was nothing much that was explosive, and there was a great deal that was redacted. But what came through was the friendly daily interaction. And Eric Treen in the Department of Homeland Security and others writing to these, emailing these CARE and ISNA operatives and saying, lunch is on us today, and what are you guys having? And they're
Sorry, someone in the chat asked me if I'm in support of Zionism or the state of Israel. The answer is 100%. I support the state of Israel. I am a Zionist. I believe that Israel does have the right to exist. The Jewish people have a right to self determination. I think Palestine is fake. There is no Palestine. I actually think that Gaza and Judea and Samaria both belong to Israel. And if the anyone has an issue with that, they can go to Jordan, which was the original Arab Palestine. Israel belongs to the people of Israel.
Bringing them in to consult on a regular basis. And this is like if FDR had the German-American Bund, Fritz Kuhn, come into the White House and chat after the United States declared war on Germany. Yes, well, you've got a point there. There are precedents. Yes, hi. How are you?
To have a micro example of what you've just been talking about, we now have as the charge d'affaires for the Sudan embassy, the former head of national intelligence and secret services in Sudan, Mohammed Atta El Mullah, is here. We're trying to normalize relations with Sudan. We're on step 2, according to the Atlantic Council. What do you make of that?
It's just more of the same short-sighted realpolitik, that we think that we can deal with these people on the basis that we deal with France or Germany. That it really comes from the postmodern notion that everybody's good at heart, and if we just sit down and talk about our differences, we'll be able to find common ground. And that really, of course, guides so much of Western policy. That the Ayatollah Khamenei and Hassan Rouhani, they're just guys like us, and we can strike a deal. We just have to come to an understanding. The idea that there might be people who have radically different values, radically different priorities, no interest really in being pals, it doesn't enter their minds. But this is
The reason it doesn't enter their minds is because there are a number of organizations in the United States who are constantly trying to normalize and whitewash the crimes of Islamic dictatorships. For example, there's an Islamic regime lobby group in the United States called the National Iranian American Council, or NIAC. NIAC is funded by the Islamic Republic, and it is one of the ways the Islamic Republic has pushed its agenda and tried to normalize relations, right? And so we call them the reformists, because NIAC tends to push this ideology, exactly what Robert Spencer just spoke about. NIAC pushes the ideology that the Islamic Republic isn't really the enemy. They can be negotiated with, they can be rationalized with, they can be reasoned with. They're rational actors, so they push that lie basically as a way to just keep Americans away, and to allow the Islamic Republic to just continue spreading its Islamic Jihad, not just in the Middle East, but in North America as well. A lot of the destabilization that you're seeing happening in Western society is being funded by the Islamic Republic, which is occupying my country of Iran. And it's being done through these organizations like the National Iranian American Council, which again is the political lobbying branch of the Islamic Republic. I would love it if, in the same way that, CARE is being sanctioned and being labeled as a terrorist organization in the United States, I really wish that the US government would do the same thing with the National Iranian American Council. And for all the Iranian Americans, or just Americans in general who are watching this, I don't know, maybe you guys should get on that and get started, because that's another group, that's another lobby group that's pushing and promoting this Islamist ideology and this Islamist narrative, which is exactly what Robert Spencer here is speaking about.
This is a deeply entrenched State Department idea that goes back to the hearts and minds initiatives that we pursued in the third.
Oh, sorry. And Amir, thank you so much for the super sticker. I appreciate that. Thank you for the support. All right, I'll go back a little bit here just so that now we can listen to what Robert Spencer is saying after my explanation about all these pro-Islamic regime lobby groups that are impacting U.S. policy.
That we think that we can deal with these people on the basis that we deal with France or Germany. That it really comes from the postmodern notion that everybody's good at heart. And if we just sit down and talk about our differences, we'll be able to find common ground. And that really, of course, guides so much of Western policy. That the Ayatollah Khamenei and Hassan Rouhani, they're just guys like us. And we can strike a deal. We just have to come to an understanding. The idea that there might be people who have radically different values,
Yeah, as an Iranian, I can tell you, do not negotiate with terrorists. You cannot rationalize with them. You cannot deal with them. These are people that literally want to murder Americans.
radically different priorities, no interest really in being pals. It doesn't enter their minds. But this is a deeply entrenched State Department idea that goes back to the hearts and minds initiatives that we pursued in the Third World in the Cold War. And it's just been transposed now to a new context where it's even less effective, because there's no way with a certain kind of Islamic mindset. Now, people are people everywhere, and human nature is always the same. You might be able to win over some hearts and minds somewhere. But generally, you've got also to deal with Muslim clerics who will tell you that the infidels will come and try to steal your Islam away by giving you roads and hospitals and basketballs and such. And you have to hate them all the more when they come to you with all their largesse, but take it. And so it's ultimately just a waste of time and a waste of money, and it's not going to get us anywhere. And I can guarantee you that. And if I talked to those guys today, they would say, well, you don't know anything. You've never been a diplomat. You've never been in the foreign service. You have to leave this to the experts. But the fact is, what they have done and the basis on which they have done it has failed again and again and again and again and again. And I am advocating here for some very simple and obvious truths that if they were to base their actions upon, rather than their wishful thinking and fantasy-based policy making that they're pursuing today, they might end up being more successful. And I would submit that when we look back on this, when our children's children look back on this after they've paid the jizya, they will see that this whole establishment, foreign policy establishment, was wrongheaded. And I hope that we wake up to that before it's too late.
If I remember correctly, there were papers found in a basement in Edinburgh during the moment which outlined all the steps that the government would take in order to bring Sharia to overcome our government. Anyway, I think that 3% of the population was the number that I focused on. If I remember, that was when they started to run for office. But I think we have to be really, really careful, because if we look at London and what's happened in London and England and France and Germany, and all the trouble that these people are having, we seem to think, oh, it'll never happen here.
Yes.
Well, I read in the paper today, 2 days ago, that 93 Muslims are running for office in our country now. And nobody seems to think, oh, what's going on? And how does that relate to? They don't read, they don't teach, they don't know anything.
Yeah. So consider Keith Ellison. I don't really know the story about why he's leaving Congress. It would seem to me that being a member of the House of Representatives is better than being Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. My immediate guess as to why he's moving down is because perhaps of the allegations against him. I don't know. But think about what damage he can do as Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, which has been a hotbed of jihad activity and Al-Shabaab recruitment, ISIS recruitment right in Minneapolis. among the Somali community. If he puts an end to investigations of that, it can proliferate, and he could be in a position to do that very easily.
And what would you suggest as a way to capture all these people that are running?
We have to be able to speak forthrightly about these issues. But right now, that's why they've been so indefatigable in making sure that speaking forthrightly about these issues has been so terribly stigmatized. And anybody who speaks out about this or raises concerns or says, wait a minute, do we really want a hijab-wearing Muslim in the United States Congress? What are the implications of that? And then, it's, of course, you have to deal with the charges of racism and bigotry and Islamophobia. Well, if you are willing to brave that, then you can speak about the nature of Sharia and of women's rights and the implications of wearing a hijab, such as I outlined a little while ago with Sarsour, and try to frame Ilhan Omar, the hijab-wearing congressional candidate. Of course, she's running unopposed, so it would just be...
Ooh. We all know what's happening now with Ilhan Omar. I haven't even spoken about what's going on in Minnesota because there is so much information coming out. So I'm going to give it, a little bit of time there, but I'm definitely going to be speaking about Somalia and what's happening in Minnesota. Of course, I'm going to be focusing more on what the government said. I'm just waiting for more details from the US government about this, because they have said that a lot of the money that was, scammed, was sent back to fund Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab is an Islamic terrorist group in Somalia. It's actually the Somalian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. So again, Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Shabaab is Muslim Brotherhood, CARE is Muslim Brotherhood. And right now, CARE is going to the defense of what's happening in Minnesota. So as you can tell, there's definitely a connection here. And yeah, like it based on what U.S. officials have said, it seems as if the $8 billion fraud conducted by people within the Somalian community, which allegedly was also facilitated by Ilhan Omar. A lot of that U.S. taxpayer money has gone to Al Shabaab, which is crazy, right? So I'm actually looking into that. I'm waiting to get more information, but I will definitely be doing an episode on that, and I'll be speaking about that. And guys, this isn't just something that's happening in the Somalian community. There are numerous organizations that funnel money to Islamic terrorist groups under the guise of charity or whatever. So what's happening in Minnesota, guys, it's not a one-off. It happens in a lot of places through various means.
A matter of trying to call attention to these issues. She's going to Congress, but frame show her to be what she really is, as an instrument of oppression and somebody who is trying to make the world worse for women. And we have to go on the offensive in this regard. The problem is then all these problems become interrelated, and then the problem of our being deplatformed and not being able to have a voice in social media becomes a very salient issue. So we can only hope that some of this is going to break our way. But the deplatforming is very serious, because if we can have the best arguments in the world, but if we can't get them out, then we're done for. And the social media giants today control the means of communication to a greater degree than any totalitarian state ever did.
Grover Norquist was mentioned a few years ago. I have not heard about him. Do you have any insight based on that?
I don't actually. I haven't heard anything. Maybe Claire knows or Chris, but I haven't heard anything about what Grover Norquist has been doing. Many of you know, I'm sure, that he was involved with Abdurrahman al-Amoudi, the al-Qaeda financier. He had connections to other people who were very questionable. in regard to their own connections to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood and so on. And he's always been very, very dismissive to anybody, notably Frank Gaffney, who has called attention to this and just accused them of racism and Islamophobia, and that's the end of the story. And this kind of thing is, I think, emblematic of the fix that we're in, that these kinds of discussions that we need to have. If Grover really is compromised with all his power and influence, then that's a very important question. But we can't even ask it. Just like when Michelle Bachmann asked about asked for an investigation of Muslim Brotherhood infiltration into the United States government. St. John McCain denounced her on the floor of the Senate and shut it down. Yes, I do think that. Sunnis and Shias are certainly cooperating. I don't know where the ultimate orchestration comes from, but there is orchestration. I could tell you that because I'm constantly trying to answer their arguments on an intellectual basis at Jihad Watch, my website, and various articles and such. And I notice that there are certain times when many, many Muslim spokesmen say the same thing. You know, Ibrahim Hooper will make a statement, the Muslims are the new Jews. And then 3 days later, Reza Aslan will say, the Muslims are the new Jews. And a couple days after that, Keith Ellison will say, the Muslims are the new Jews. And I think, okay, who told them to say the Muslims are the new Jews? And I don't know who's coordinating it, but there is coordination. It seems to me to be clear. And yes, the Sunnis and Shia are cooperating. Of course, the most obvious example of that is 9/11, when the Saudis and Iran collaborated in working with the 9/11 hijackers. There's documentation of this, much of it thanks to Claire Lopez, in the book, The History of Jihad. And of course, the Iranians, the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is Shiite today.
Thank you for finally calling it out. The Islamic Republic of Iran, not the Iranians, because I'm Iranian, and just like the other 80% of Iranians, 80 to 90% were fighting the Islamic Republic. So finally, like literally, it's a 1 hour, I think it's like I don't know, 1 hour, 20-minute long video. And literally in the last 20 seconds, he finally called it what it actually is, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Thank you, Robert. Thank you for that.
Today funds Sunni Hamas and Islamic Jihad, as well as
Let's go back a little bit.
Okay, who told them to say the Muslims are the new Jews? And I don't know who's coordinating it, but there is coordination. It seems to me to be clear. And yes, the Sunnis and Shia are cooperating. Of course, the most obvious example of that is 9/11, when the Saudis and Iran collaborated in working with the 9/11 hijackers. There's documentation of this, much of it thanks to Claire Lopez, in the book, The History of Jihad. And of course, the Iranians, the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is Shiite, today funds Sunni Hamas and Islamic Jihad, as well as having also funded Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, which are Sunni. There's an old proverb, my brother against my brother, but both of us against our cousin. And Sunnis and Shia hate each other, but they'll always collaborate against infidels.
I'm afraid we're out of time.
Thank you. It's been
That's very true. Wow. So that was very informative, guys. I hope that gave you a little bit more of an understanding into the history of jihad. I wanted to thank you all for joining. Thank you to the mods, the members, the subscribers, and welcome to all of the new people. Thank you to everyone who participated in the super chat to help support my channel. Just wanted to remind you guys, you're more than welcome to become members as well. If you're a member on my YouTube channel, I think it's like $10 a month or something. And I'm going to be starting to do members only live streams and content as well. I'll be taking your suggestions from the members only message board. Those live streams will also give me an opportunity to be more responsive in the chat as well, because it'll be obviously a smaller group of people and of course less spam as well. I just want to give a shout out to Major. So he gave a very good suggestion for what I should talk about next. So for tonight's evening live stream, I'm going to be playing this video and giving my thoughts on it. So it's a video by Bill Warner, Why We Are Afraid, a 1400-year secret. Now, this is very interesting. This was posted 12 years ago, but it only has 971 views. So we're going to watch this tonight. And yeah, it's from someone named Dr. Bill Warner, Center for the Study of Political Islam. So there you go. I'm going to be uploading, or I'm going to be putting a notification for, when the live stream will begin in a couple of hours. So make sure that you like and subscribe and you turn on notifications, whether you're on X or on YouTube. Of course, if you want to join the conversation, please join us on my YouTube channel. Thank you, everyone, for your support, and I will see you guys later tonight. And as always, Payande Iran, Javid Shah.